Okay, it is 12 noon and we are going to get started right on time. Welcome everyone to our RedShelf Connections event. Today is Infosandwich, which is a program we bring to you to provide knowledge to power your strategy in motion. It is one of 4 programs in the RedShelf Connections series, which are designed to bring you new ideas, professional development opportunities, and help to strengthen your networks. You can sign up for upcoming events at about.redshelf.com/connections, and you can also find recordings to all our previous events at that site as well. Today we are welcoming Daniel Gonzalez Jr. He's Director of Distance Education at Alvin Community College, and he is joined by Jeff Collins, Product Director at RedShelf. The title of our session today is LMS as the Hub of Course Materials Delivery. The rapid shift to distance learning has caused operational upheaval in LMS administration of course materials at a time when resources needed to react are strained. Daniel and Jeff are going to discuss the actions taken and lessons learned when moving a campus online quickly. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, we are recording this session and it will be posted to YouTube, and we invite you to keep your cameras on if you are comfortable doing so. But if not, and you don't want to be in the recording that we post, you can keep that off. You are also muted, and please remain so, but there will be time for Q&A at the end of the presentation where you can raise your hand and ask a live question if you'd like. During the presentation, please use the chat feature of Zoom to enter your questions. We will get to them during the presentation or during the Q&A at the end. And again, you can raise your hand using the feature in Zoom chat to ask a question live. Anything that we don't have time to address, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So I'll just take a second to introduce Daniel and Jeff. Daniel Gonzalez Jr. is the Director of Distance Education at Alvin Community College. He has extensive experience as both an instructional designer and as a trainer at various higher education institutions. He is currently pursuing a doctorate of education in instructional systems, design, and technology from Sam Houston State University. And Jeff Collins is Product Director at RedShelf with over 25 years in the higher education publishing industry, in the development of digital courseware platforms, LMS integrated service offerings, and systems implementation with colleges and university administrations. Welcome, Daniel, and welcome, Jeff. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and invite Jeff to share his screen.
Does everyone see my screen?
We can see it.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to LMS as the Hub of Course Materials Delivery, actions taken and lessons learned when moving a campus online quickly. The complete and immediate move to online courses has challenged instructional and administrative staff who were previously positioned to provide services to a varying degree of participation in online. The level of faculty and student readiness to manage and participate exclusively in online teaching and learning has shifted to require rapid enablement of skills. Now, all faculty and students, regardless of their prior readiness, have to adapt to 100% online instruction and the use of digital learning materials nearly overnight. Such a seismic shift has had major implications for both systems and processes. In the course materials space specifically, online learning professionals and resources at colleges and universities have been thrust into the mainstream. They've become a go-to resource for many casual users of digital and online delivery who are now forced to do some very new things. Luckily, most schools have scaled up learning management systems and processes in place to provision online course instances, digital learning content, and learning tools to nearly all faculty and courses. Today, we will discuss the LMS, digital content, and learning tools as vehicles and their use in these times. To get started, I would like to, let me see here, make sure I got screen here. I'd like to get introduce Daniel Gonzalez Jr., and I would like to get an introduction to Alvin Community College and talk about some of the challenges and impacts. So Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about Alvin?
Sure, Jeff. So Alvin Community College is, categorically speaking, a smaller community college. So we are roughly around 6,000 FTEs, which is actually a little bit higher than we've seen in previous years. We're a small town located centrally between Galveston and Houston. Roughly speaking, we normally have about 1,000 sections of courses per long semester. So between the fall semester, we have about 1,000 courses. In the spring semester, we also have 1,000 courses. And in the summer sessions, we usually have anywhere from 200 maybe to 300 courses. And so this includes all of our terms. So for a fall semester, we'll have a 16-week term, a 12-week term, and then we also have 3 mini sessions. And in the summer session, we also have a 11-week term, a summer 1 term that's 5 weeks, and a summer 2 term that's 5 weeks. So with that in mind, if you think about the fact that our overall courses, we have about 10% of our courses that are delivered completely online. And so roughly speaking, that is probably a little bit lower than some other institutions. So in a way that made this a little bit more challenging, but we did have a lot of things working in our favor in terms of shifting to a fully online modality, which was done the end of March.
So does that put the whole thing in perspective for us in terms of the sizing? Is there something you could tell us about the readiness of your audience coming into this? Just because you had 10% at a full online modality, how would you characterize the rest of your faculty and staff in terms of their ability to participate in online at this point?
So in terms of their ability, we have a varying we have a variation in our faculty in terms of what they do online. So for example, if you think about the fact that of those 1,000 sections, we have for this particular circumstance that we were in, we had roughly about 740 courses that were not fully online. So those ranged anywhere from a face-to-face course that used a Blackboard shell just for grades and posting a syllabus. And then you had that spectrum go all the way to an instructor heavily utilizing that Blackboard shell, in that when you looked at the shell, it really did look like a fully online course. So that's the spectrum we had for us in between of terms of how faculty were utilizing those Blackboard shells.
Were there any concerns about students and their ability to participate from home? Or are there expectations set when they become a student that really they should have access to some computing resources and networking and other such things?
Well, our situation is a little unique in that we're not an urban area. We're a smaller town. So internet access for a lot of our students is quite spotty. So we have a lot of students that live in rural areas where the only connection they might have is just through a hotspot with their cell phone. And they don't have a dedicated provider from a major company where they receive their internet services from. So that was quite challenging for us too, because in terms of this shift, we had to figure out, we have to make this shift because of these external circumstances, but at the same time too, we have to keep in mind our students, in that how many of them truly are going to be able to complete these courses now that we have to put them online. So if anything, going into this entire situation, we had to really take a good hard look in terms of how feasible is this going to be for our entire student population, because realistically, it may not be feasible for our entire population because they don't have the reliable high-speed internet access that they need to complete these courses.
Well, that really does characterize the situation coming into this. It sounds like you had quite a few challenges. So I have a series of questions that I'd like to explore with you right now.
Sure.
So moving into that, basically I call this segment from upheaval to uptake. So basically the leadership that you have to provide and the types of things that are going on in your mind as this is happening to you. So what I'd first want to know is, what was your immediate reaction? So how did you decide which initial tasks you had to perform it quickly? And how did you manage all that? So what was that process like, and what was the thought process, and when did you learn about this, and what was your reaction to it?
So we began having initial planning stages for this, probably early February, which I was involved in some of those conversations. And then when it looked as if this was, the likelihood of this occurring was going to be higher, higher than lower, then I started being involved in more of those conversations, because my department, which is distance education, we handle everything in terms of Blackboard. We handle the instructional design side, we handle the technical support side, and then we have our IT department doing a lot of the background integration with our student information system. So in terms of our department, we really had to look in terms of how are we going to be able to get this done, one, quickly, because this is going to have to be a quick turnaround, and how are we going to be able to ensure that faculty can find the information they need. So from my past experience working at other higher ed institutions, for the most part, and from my experience, most higher ed institution websites are pretty daunting. It's hard to locate information on them, but higher ed institutions involve so many different departments. So unfortunately, the organization of them is pretty complex. Even with a community college as small as us, it's still difficult sometimes to find things on our website. So one of the first things I had to start thinking about, because it's come up so many times in the past in terms of where do I find this? So you have to go to this site for this, you have to go to this site for that, or you have to go to this site to find software, you have to go to this site to find technical support. So in terms of the instructional piece, in terms of what resources our faculty were going to need, one of the first things that I started to think about is that where can I put all this information in one place so that faculty can find it easier versus having to go to so many different places. So that's one of the first things that we did.
So sort of like a response level presence, just centralized focus for people to get to it. One place to go to, right?
Yeah, one place to go to. And so our institution, like other institutions, we have a public facing site, and then we have also our internal portal. So we had our public facing site, which was used for various purposes, but then we had our other internal instructional site, which was used specifically for this transition to that fully online format.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question. So with this scramble to establish communications, with this very large audience that you have of faculty, students, staff, everybody coming together here, what's important to communicate on day one, so at the onset of this? And then how do you manage that as things start to get in flight, where you've got, you know, a lot of activity starting to form in different places, just to make sure stuff doesn't go off the rails on you?
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things that I wanted to ensure that our faculty were fully aware of is that they weren't alone in this process. Because again, we have faculty that are all within that spectrum of, I only use my Blackboard shelf for my syllabus and my grade book, to others that use it fully, use all the tools within it. So especially for those faculty that weren't accustomed to teaching in an online modality, I wanted them to make sure that they knew that they were not alone in this process, and that there were people that they could seek assistance from through this process. And so if anything, that was probably the message from the very beginning, and that you do not have to do this by yourself, and you're not expected to do this by yourself. This is what we can offer you, and this is how we can assist you in a virtual format, which was new to us as well.
So using my flight analogy, you became the control tower in all this.
Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much what it became, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So my next question is how has this affected the partnership that you have with your faculty? I mean, you know, right now, administrators and distance learning professionals at institutions have varying degrees. They work with some closer than others and so on, but has the level of engagement been up considerably? I mean, are they reaching out to you a lot more questions, a lot more activity? How are you managing all this additional attention?
Well, one of the things that I always try to make sure to do, and I've done this at other higher ed institutions that I've been at, is that I've always tried to ensure that from my standpoint, in terms of what they need from distance education, because we're considered an instructional support service. So the assurance for me has always been with faculty in that if you need assistance from our department, it is going to be there. And so I've been able to forge a lot of good partnerships with faculty in that sense, and that if there's something that they need, they can come to us for that assistance, even if it's a very basic question, because a lot of times it begins with those basic questions, and then it just starts to build in terms of what an instructor may want to do with their course if you're going through a typical instructional design process. But specifically for this, I wanted to make sure they knew that they were not alone in this. And that was the message, that in terms of assistance across the board, that was the message to our faculty in terms of instruction, in terms of IT support, in terms of our students needing resources, in terms of finding internet providers, devices, things like that. And so fortunately for our department, we've always had a great relationship with our faculty. We work extremely well with our faculty, and I like to think that a lot of it has to do because of how willing we are to assist them.
Have you had to expand your hours, though? I mean, in terms of being available later in the evenings and all that sort of thing as well?
Yes, we've had to do that because for our department, for example, we have been working virtually since March 6th. So we have not been on campus since then. So all of our operations in terms of distance education, that's all been remotely. So we are having to be available more in the evenings because we have a lot more students utilizing tools within the LMS that need troubleshooting, that need technical support, and it's just something that we have to do. So we really didn't have a choice on that, but understandably, with all our courses being online, that level of support had to be there also.
All right, that's awesome. I've got a couple of more questions I'd like to get to here. So, and this is sort of a little more general, a little more broad. If you had 3 to 5 things that you could share with counterparts at other institutions who are going through the same things right now, what would they be? So what would be your big ones that you thought were the most important things to take away from this experience?
So one of the things that I think would, and again, I try to think of this in terms of, this is not a fully fledged instructional course design process. This is an abbreviated version of that. So in that sense, faculty need to know what are the most important things that I should be concentrating on as I'm making this transition to an online course. So in that sense, I think it's important to give them tools, to provide faculty tools for that. So for example, I created our faculty a 1-page checklist of, if you're going to do anything, these are the things at a minimum that you have to be doing in your course. So let's make sure we have a syllabus in there. Let's make sure that you're keeping your grades in there. Let's make sure that you have an activity every week where you are able to see that your students are participating in your course. If your accreditation bodies, or if your higher education coordinating board, for example, for us, we have to have a way of tracking the participation for our students throughout internet courses. So what activity are you going to have them doing? Is it going to be a weekly discussion board? Is it going to be a weekly submission of an assignment? You have to keep things like accessibility in mind. So are there tools within the LMS that can help with accessibility? Because accessibility of your course materials is another really big issue that we have to be aware of. So I think having those really important points for your faculty to concentrate on really does help them with this process, because again, for a lot of faculty, this is a new process. So the expectation was not that this was going to be a well-developed quality course. It was going to be, let's put this online and let's start from here and build from here. So as far as the checklist, that was a big thing in terms of the instruction piece.
Okay,
another piece I would say too is probably the most important, is that make sure that your faculty have access to professional development that is going to help them make that shift in terms of facilitating an online course. It's very different from facilitating a face-to-face course. So if you have professional development services that you already subscribe to, a lot of you, and again, if your institution does, you know that there's a lot of materials and a lot of seminars and sessions in them. Pick out some of the most important ones that you think and put those on maybe in just a one-page list in terms of, if anything else, these are the basics of how to facilitate that online course. And provide the access information. Here's how to log in, here's how to get to it. But again, that makes the process easier for your faculty, because you want to try and make that process easier for them.
So you've sort of brought together tools and processes, and then you've added to that the professional development all in sort of one-stop shopping, so that they could get access to all those things at the same time then, right?
Exactly. And that's what I mean in terms of centralization, in terms of putting everything that they need in one place so that they're not having to hunt for things on different pages.
Well, those are really big takeaways. So that's, I think, going to be helpful to a lot of people. If you looked at now where you're at, has this affected your plans to scale digital materials and access at this point? I mean, now that you've been thrown into this in this situation, and you've gone from reacting to now shifting over to competency and looking at thriving going forward, how has this affected your thoughts on your path forward?
I think in terms of digital materials, I think what if anything, this has brought a lot of attention, one, to the potential for accessing those digital materials maybe within an LMS, but then I think digital materials in general. So I think it's a double-edged sword with this, because it's a very unique circumstance that we're in right now, but at the same time too, it's bringing a lot of these other technologies and innovations to the forefront that are really helping our instructors. So for example, even with the digital materials, specifically for this situation, we have more instructors using digital materials for their students, whether it be adopting e-textbooks, whether it be using resources from third-party vendors that they've never used before, but because they can't provide those resources in class anymore the way they used to be able to do that. So I think going forward from here, I think there's going to probably, in terms of our institution, I really think there's probably going to be more of a focus on digital materials and inclusive access. We were already going in that direction anyway. And so when I arrived, inclusive access, we were in a pilot stage, and then first it just took off after a certain point with our instructors in our bookstore. So I started becoming way more involved in this process, and I've seen that it's very advantageous for students in terms of cost of materials.
So for our audience, can you just give like a 1 or 2 sentence definition of inclusive access, just so they know what we're talking about here?
Yeah, sure. So what we do is that we have a partnership with RedShelf, in that digital materials are included for our students with their tuition. So what that means is that students have day one access to their course materials, whether it be, and I'll give you a perfect example. So we use Pearson resources. So for Pearson resources specifically, students have day one access to the e-textbook and day one access to the Pearson website for any other information that they need to access on their site. And in that sense, the day one access is great, but then too, the cost of those materials is usually significantly lower than students purchasing them on their own. And again, it's included in their tuition, so that it's not a separate cost to the student, in that I have to pay my tuition, now I have to go to the bookstore or go to Pearson, buy the code, do all these different things. It takes that part out of it.
So the advantages are the ease of getting into it,
Yes.
lower costs, and it being there on day one, and all the students get the same thing.
Exactly.
Oh, all right, fantastic. What were the instructors' top challenges when moving to inclusive access during this, uptake here? I mean, obviously there's some that already were in the program, but if you brought new ones on board just because of the crisis situation, how did that rollout and strategy start evolving when you had the need to start shifting to moving a lot of things online?
Well, one of the things that occurs, that usually does occur, we don't see it as often now, but one of the things that does occur with instructors that are new to inclusive access, and that dependent upon the publisher, the integration within the LMS is going to look different. And so the integration with Pearson looks one way. The integration with, for example, Launchpad looks another way. So if anything, that was probably the bigger obstacle for our instructors, in that you have access to it now, but there's a couple steps you need to take within the LMS to get the tool linked and working in your course.
So once the students were, I mean, once the instructors got over that small initial hurdle though, how was the student experience? Did they adapt to it pretty quickly and easily? Did it work out well for them?
Usually they do, and I've talked with our bookstore manager, Vicky, on this, and the student experience with this has been great in terms of, one, having the easy access to it, but again, it's all usually coming from the same access point within the LMS, in that if I click on this link, I know, for example, with Pearson, I'm going to be able to get to my e-textbook if I click on the first link. I'm going to be able to go to the external publisher website if I click on the second link. So from our experience, we've seen that students' experience with this has been pretty positive.
Fantastic. So in the interest of time, and it's a very engaging conversation, I'd like to get to some key takeaways here.
Yeah, sure.
So from what we've been hearing during the conversation, at least for that prior slide, we were talking about the 3 to 5 big things. Can you tell us a little bit about centralization, engagement of faculty, and then the professional development again? Just recap it for us real quick.
Sure. And I listed on this slide specifically that centralization needs to come first. And again, that's probably one of the most important things, because with any task and it doesn't even have to be a task just with faculty, any task with faculty, probably any one of us, if we have to go through a certain process, in that it's almost coming from a mandate. And again, we're in this circumstance right now because of external factors, not coming because of any mandate that we have to do it coming from a specific person. So it's more in the sense of, if I have to do something, I want to make sure things are going to be easy to find, and that things are going to be laid out very sequentially for me in terms of what I need to do. So that's why specifically I listed centralization first. Have everything in one place, have everything sequential. So for example, in terms of the way I organize things on our internal website, ours listed 4 very basic things. First one was how to get started. The next one, first one was how to get started. The next one was trainings to take. The next one was what software do I have available to me? The fourth one was how do I get support? Very simple. So within all those, here's all the information you need.
So to leave a little time for questions at the tail of this, at least a little bit, you also did engage with key faculty in this process to help you reach scale?
Yes, and I think this is what probably helped us out the most with this. So we already have faculty that teach internet courses, and they're doing a great job of it. Those are the faculty specifically that we engaged for this. Because I've built relationships with faculty as well that don't teach internet courses, but they use their Blackboard shells extensively, I also engage some of those faculty. So, and this is one of the things about working closely with the faculty at your institutions. If you do work closely with your faculty at your institutions, you know you have faculty that are doing great things. And those are the faculty that are likely going to be the ones most willing to help with this. And that was my experience with this. When I reached out for help, it was whatever you need, I will help you, because I know this is going to be pretty daunting, so you can count on me.
So that was your good, we're all in this together kind of thing, where you leverage their experience as coaches in this process for other faculty that are not as accomplished.
Yes, exactly. Right? Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because, and again, I know that in terms of faculty, but then those key faculty also know that I know there's a couple faculty within my department, I know they're struggling, so let me reach out to them specifically as well.
All right, and then we talked about professional development being centralized, and we already spent quite a bit of time talking about that, and centralizing those resources and making them right there so that you can get to them on demand while you're working through the course materials.
Yes.
So that one's already been, I think, covered quite
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
So Daniel, thank you so much for your time today. This has been great. It's been insightful. I'd like to hop on to see if there are a couple of questions and answers from the audience. So handing it back over there, Steve, are you facilitating that?
Yeah, we actually haven't had any questions come in over chat. But we did talk about any additional discussion we might have around augmenting the small staff that Daniel was managing when this came up, in that with a staff of just 2, and you talked a bit about it, but wonder if you want to expand on once you realized what you had to accomplish, how did it affect your strategy to augment your staff resources?
Yeah, so going into this, I already knew that we were not going to be able to do this alone. And I was very upfront with my administration about that, in that this has to be a process that involves numerous people. And so one of the things that I think really helped with us is that as soon as we had an indication that this was likely going to occur, all of our resources, in terms of both of my staff members, which I'm one of the 2, all of it was concentrated on, this is what we have to do in the next week or 2. No matter what, all of our concentration has to be on doing steps 1, step 2, and step 3. And so that took, a lot of our projects got put on hold. There's a lot of things we've been wanting to do. And so the want to do's got put on the back burner, and the had to do's got put in the forefront, in terms of, we have to get these things done. So it allowed us, and again, it allowed us to do a lot of things that we already operate, in my opinion, I think we already operate pretty efficiently, but at the same time too, I think it allowed us to really look in terms of, what for this specific circumstance do we really need to concentrate on, and prep our faculty, or have ready for our faculty, so that they can be ready for this process. So we had to take a good hard look in terms of our resources, our technology resources. Do we have the right tools for this? Do we need to make additional purchases for this? Do we need to up licenses? We have to take a really good hard look at everything with this.
Thanks, Daniel. And kind of related to that, we had a question come through from Krista. Have you seen an increased interest in IA and the use of instructional technology coming from the faculty? Like, for example, a more proactive approach from them, investigating what the opportunities are?
I actually have with this, because we have faculty, for example, using virtual meeting software now. It's always been available. They've always been a little hesitant to use it because they've never really had to use it. And now that they're using it, they're seeing a lot of benefits from it. So I've had some faculty already tell me too, I know we're in this situation, hopefully just temporarily, but I'm going to probably continue with virtual meeting software, or I'm going to continue with some sort of digital access for course materials for my students, because I see that it's beneficial for them in this circumstance. So if we ever go back to whatever the new normal is, and that students are returning to classes, it's going to likely benefit them in that specific setting as well.
So let me make a connection there, because when you think about something like your virtual meeting software, that's typically a university budgeted thing, and you're provisioning it for a whole audience.
Yes.
And when you look at inclusive access, the student kind of sees it the same way. It's there for them on day 1 when they come into it. Mm-hmm. And when you look at those kind of things, it's all there, it's all provisioned for me, and I'm ready to go.
Yes.
So I can see where that same approach kind of applies to that as well. You're providing for your whole audience at one time.
Exactly. That's exactly what we had to do. And we had to take a big hard look at everything. But then at the same time too, we also had to make sure that if you're going to be using software, make sure that it's software that we have licensed. So don't go out and start using other software, because of course there's FERPA and privacy concerns. We have to keep that in mind, especially now for everything that we're doing virtually. That, if anything, that has come to the forefront as well, privacy issues.
Thanks. And with that, we are just 5 minutes over. So if you're still hanging with us, thank you for that. Jeff, would you mind advancing to your next slide?
Not at all.
We are going to wrap it up here, but leave a channel open for you for follow-up questions. If you have any, please send them to hello@redshelf.com. We'll make sure that we get a follow-up for you if you have anything still outstanding. The previous sessions, as I mentioned, are available on recording at about.redshelf.com/connections. And I will point to last week's session on accessibility. We had a session last week with North Central University and Marcy Walensky discussing that important issue, which Daniel mentioned as well. So you may want to check that out. Mm-hmm. Also, a fun event next week is Bookshelf Bingo. We'll be hosting next Thursday evening an event just designed to build some connections between our community and have a little fun with bingo, and there will be some prizes. So please register for that at about.redshelf.com/connections. And with that, I want to thank Jeff for helping to put this together and leading the discussion here with Daniel. And Daniel, thank you so much for offering some insights to your experience, and these key takeaways I think will be really helpful for our attendees today.
Of course, thank you for having me. And you know, as I've told Mike Repos in the past, you all are really great to work with. So whatever you need from me, just let me know.
We really appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to sign off for today. Thanks to all our attendees for getting involved with RedShelf Connections. You will receive an opportunity also to give us some feedback on this session. So look for that in email, as well as the link to this recording. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, y'all too. Thank you all.